Anthony Pereira joins us. He's a professor in the Department of International Development and at the Brazil Institute at King's College London. Anthony, welcome to the program. A lot of people call Bolsonaro the Trump of the tropics. And living up to that nickname, he's been casting doubt, as Melinda referred to in that report, on the electoral system in Brazil. How exactly is he trying to discredit the system?
Well, thanks, Adnan. As you know, there have been these parallels between Bolsonaro and Trump. And he tried to get a bill passed in Congress that would change the system of voting from the electronic vote, which they have now, to a paper ballot system, even though he had no evidence that the electronic voting produced fraud. It was just allegations, as with Trump and mail-in ballots in the US. The bill didn't pass, but he's now saying that the results in 2022 could well be fraudulent, and that maybe the election shouldn't happen. So there are some eerie parallels here between what Trump did in 2020 and what Bolsonaro seems to be trying to do right now.
Another parallel might be the sort of blind loyalty that his supporters afford him. And of everything that's happened, especially with the pandemic, for which he has been universally slammed, they have stood by him. Are they still there by his side? Has anybody left?
There's a hardcore that's there. A recent poll by Pesquisa Atlas showed that his government was positively evaluated by 35% of those surveyed. This was done between 30th of August and 4th September. But it also showed that 64% of people negatively evaluate his government. So he's got a core of support, but it's not the majority of the population. There's also a very interesting issue in the demonstrations today that people will be looking at carefully, and that's to what extent members of the state police forces participate in these demonstrations. Because they are allowed to, by law, not in uniform and not with a gun, but they're allowed to go plainclothes and express their views as any other citizen would in demonstrations. But if they're caught on camera shouting for things like closing the Supreme Court or closing Congress or having some kind of coup, which is the language that is sometimes used by supporters of Bolsonaro, then they will be in a little bit more hot water legally. And this is important because if Bolsonaro were to try something like 6th of January 2021 in the US, it's the military police forces, the state military police forces, that might furnish the shock troops for that kind of act.
Yeah, and you can see how using the word coup for a government that's led by a former military officer could be dangerous, and for a country that until not that long ago had a military dictatorship for more than 2 decades. It's so easy to criticize a man like Bolsonaro. Has he done anything good? What are the positives that have come out from his leadership?
Well, probably his most positive act was passing the pension reform at the end of his first year in office, which was something he delegated to his finance, his economics minister, and Congress, the president of the lower house of Congress. Bolsonaro is not a constructive politician. He's not a politician who's able to convey to people a sort of positive program in terms of policy. He's the opposite of a policy wonk. He's sort of he's a campaigner. He's someone who loves to appear in front of the people and pose as a kind of savior of the country. But in terms of the policy content, there's often nothing there. He's again delegated to the so-called Central, this majoritarian bloc in Congress, the tough work of passing legislation. So there are things going on. There's some interesting initiatives by his government, but he is almost as if he's also a critic. He's so intent on being a critic of the establishment and attacking the other powers, including the Supreme Court, including the Congress, that he's simultaneously an incumbent, but also someone in opposition. So it's a very schizophrenic government in that way, I think.
It's certainly very interesting to observe from the outside. Anthony, thank you so much indeed. Really appreciate it. Anthony Pereira from King's College London.